Welcome back to RotoQL University. This is our NBA strategy course. We first introduced advanced NBA DFS strategy. Now we'll be diving into the individual positions, starting with point guard selection. I'm Mike and I've got Sahil here. Sahil, point guard's huge position in DFS. Certainly had a lot to talk about.
Yep, I think the most important position, to be honest.
Yep, we got a lot of data to support that, so let's get started.
Yeah, so we're going to start with some of the more basic stuff, and then we'll kind of dive a little bit deeper as we go on into the lesson. So this is kind of pretty generic stuff for all positions, but we obviously want to focus on minutes, and that's something that we'll constantly talk about. Pace is very important. More possessions equals more fantasy points. Usage rates, assist versus turnover ratio. These are important. Assist over turnover ratio is probably more important for just evaluating a player as a whole rather than DFS. Defensive versus position is pretty important, and you'll see a lot more consistency with point guard defense from team to team. And personal fouls, is the defender point to giving up 3 points? Are they prone to fouling the opponent? This is probably going to be a little less useful for point guards in other positions, but still something you want to keep in mind. And value, backup point guards can tend to be a very good source of value. For the reasons we'll discuss later, they can kind of get fantasy points no matter how good or bad they are. So if we take a look at just average fantasy points, this is FanDuel. We'll see that point guards are definitely up there. Will be less than power forwards and centers. And this is obviously at a team level, so we want to kind of focus on point guards and power forwards mostly. Some centers, though there are few true centers left in the league, and kind of shooting guard and small forward will tend to be the weakest positions. So on the scoring system side, you'll see that DraftKings will tend to favor point guards a lot more, since point guards will have a lot more turnovers simply because they have the ball in their hand a lot. You won't be penalized as much, and will get more double-doubles than shooting guards or small forwards generally. And since they're a guard, they'll shoot more threes. So for the same kind of projection, you're going to see that DraftKings points are definitely going to be more favorable for point guards. So this number obviously changes every year, but if you look at the last year, which is 2015, 2016, we can see what the defensive versus position for point guards is. And what we'll see is a general trend is that teams that play at a high pace and aren't very good are going to give up the most point guard points. Teams like the Lakers, the Suns, the Kings, the Timberwolves, teams that aren't very good at defense, play in a high pace, they're definitely going to give a lot of point guard points. Should come as no surprise that the Spurs, the Heat, the Jazz, all very good defensive teams, are going to not allow a lot of point guard points. And you'll see that generally teams with a very strong bigs are going to lower the point guard points because they can't drive as much, and it'll definitely limit the overall defensive or assist opportunities. So if we kind of take a look at the correlations between the overall defensive rating and the pace by position, you'll see that when we go to point guard, there's a pretty good correlation between the overall defensive rating and what the fantasy points are. You'll see that it's definitely higher than small forwards and centers, and a little bit less than shooting guards and power forward, or about the same with power forwards. The thing we want to notice there is that these things will definitely get better as the season goes along. So in the beginning of the season, you definitely want to take with a grain of salt, especially because matchups can definitely affect this. One thing though that's very important here we can take away is that pace is very important for point guards. Since point guards rely a lot on assists, a lot more than other positions, just having the ball in their hands more is going to lead to a lot more assists, whether they're just coming off a pick on a pick and pop or just driving and kicking. Just having more possessions is going to significantly increase the amount of assists the point guard's going to get. So we really want to focus on high-paced teams versus high-pace opposition, and that was kind of backed up versus the team defensive versus position on the previous slide. So let's get a little bit more advanced and look at z-scores. So a z-score is the number of standard deviations a player is above average. So we kind of want to know how good is this player above the average. And then since z-scores are normalized, we can kind of compare this by different positions. So a center that is 2 z-scores above average, or 2 z-scores, versus a guard at 2 z-scores are going to be the roughly same percentile. So we'll see that players that are above 2 are going to be the top 2 or 3%, so very few players are going to reach there, versus players that are 1.5 are really going to be the top 10-15%. So we really want to obviously always going to focus on the top end players, especially when we're not adjusting for injuries and value. So let's take a quick look at some of the z-scores, and one thing that you'll notice here is that the top point guards are generally far and above the best players when compared with other positions, because the top point guards will be able to both put up a lot of points and also get a lot of assists, whereas other positions like maybe a center or a shooting guard, you're not going to have as high highs or as low of a lows. So you're going to see a lot more flat distribution with other positions that you won't see with point guards. So if we take the top 25 z-scores for point guards, you'll see that was it 5 of the top 7 are going to be point guards until overall z-scores. So this, since 15 is an absurd z-score, what this is actually doing is taking all of these individual stats and summing up the z-scores there. So there are 9 stats, and Steph Curry's z-score is 15.46. So it means on average on each of these stats, he's about a little over 1.5 on average on each of those stats. And certain stats he's in the very, very top. Certain stats like blocks, he's below average. So you'll see that a player like Russell Westbrook, who puts up a ton of assists, is going to have the highest assist z-score, right there with Chris Paul and John Wall. And Russell Westbrook is one of the only that has a positive rebound z-score. So one thing that we'll see is that the point guard usage is definitely going to correlate a lot with the value. Point guards, you either are going to be kind of people that like Marcelo Huertas, who pretty much is never ever going to shoot and is just going to pass it. Same thing with like a Matthew Dellavedova and a Pat Beverly. They'll be good plays in certain situations, but they don't have the usage that's going to back up the value. In most cases, we really want to focus on players that have a high usage and are also point guards. So Dennis Schroeder is someone that we'll talk about a lot, and I think it's going to be a great play in this upcoming season because he has a very high usage, but wasn't get very many minutes. But now he'll get a lot more minutes. And then we'll see like players like Steph Curry, obviously to no one's surprise, is the highest usage, right up there with Lillard, and is putting up the highest value. So that's definitely something we want to keep in mind when we're kind of picking point guards. So if you take a look at an example lineup, we'll see that I actually have 3 point guards in there, which is the maximum you are allowed on DraftKings, which can kind of show you that they're the most important position. We'll see that I targeted Chicago, Boston against Phoenix, and Portland against Philadelphia. So if we look back at the team versus defense, we definitely want to target Phoenix, and that's what I did with Isaiah Thomas, who put up a very good performance, and you can see with his ownership percentage pretty much through the roof. It wasn't any surprise. And we'll see that with Isaiah Thomas and Damian Lillard, we have a very high usage right there. With this Elfrid Payton pick, his usage would have been increased because there's no Victor Oladipo in this specific game. So you can see all 3 of these point guards put up very good scores. Damian Lillard did not put up that great a score given his price and matchup, but Isaiah Thomas and Elfrid Payton definitely put up more than value. Yep, so again, we have plenty of resources here for you at RotoQL. Visit our support center at Zendesk. QL Wire will have a lot of good content, and RotoQL University will be doing a lot of videos on NBA and should be hopefully informative for all of you out there.